You're definitely not going to hear this on MSNBC tonight, CNN, probably not even Fox, because they don't particularly care about these policies. But here is a short list of policies Biden ran on that he has not delivered. We will definitely bring this up throughout the night. Obviously, a $15 minimum wage, which Zeynab and Peter, I'd love your thoughts, because at this point, I'd say that's the conservative position. With inflation, I don't really think $15 minimum wage is really what we should be pushing for anymore. Public option, he abandoned out of his verbal encyclopedia a long time ago. He ran on ending drilling on public land. He has increased drilling on public land. Ran on the PRO Act, which clearly he's done nothing on. Police reform, we put reform in quotes because as we're seeing, we don't think this can be reformed. $2,000 checks became $1,400 and a kick in the ass. A lot of people don't remember, Zeynab. He ran during the Democratic primary in the debate against Bernie. He said COVID care would be free, meaning if you go to the hospital for COVID infection or anything, the treatment would be free. Well, go talk to the people, including Steve Grumbine, who were nearly bankrupt from that hospital bill after COVID care. Child tax credit. This one, you give them, a half clap. Got it for a year, but of course he let President Manchin and Vice President Sinema sabotage that. He did not fight whatsoever to extend that because he, in my view, doesn't really truly in his bones believe in these policies and doesn't want to fight for them. Subsidized child care, that went out the window, and ending right to work laws. So this is just a couple that we came up with over the last 15 minutes. I'm sure there's more we forgot. I think he's going to exaggerate a whole lot of things tonight, but namely how strong the economy is. I just want to introduce our newest guest who's going to join us during this State of the Union. Joining us now, not on the Senate floor, Senator Bernie Sanders has joined us to give commentary on his good friend Joe Biden. Welcome, Senator.
Jordan, it's good to be with you. Zeynab, nice to see you. I'm going to try to be as respectful as I can regarding my good friend Joe.
Congratulations to Chuck Schumer, another term as Senate Minority Leader. I think only this time you have a slightly bigger majority, Mr. Leader. You're the majority leader. About that much bigger?
Bernie, he just called Chuck Schumer the minority leader. Isn't he the majority leader?
The last I checked, the Democrats still have control of the U.S. Senate. He is the majority leader. Joe's not off to a very good start here.
2 years ago, the economy was reeling. I stand here tonight after we've created, with the help of many people in this room, 12 million new jobs. More jobs created in 2 years than any president's created in 4 years because of you all, because of the American people. 2 years ago.
Obviously, the media, Biden's not going to tell you, but a significant portion, nearly half of the jobs created have been in the leisure and hospitality industry. No disrespect to anybody who works in that industry, really hard work, restaurants, bars, hotels, etc. Not exactly booming union, high wage, great benefit jobs. Zeynab?
It's not just those jobs that are being created, but we've also got a problem with it being a majority gig work, especially among millennials. So not only is there no union work under most restaurant jobs like I worked at for 15 years, but the gig economy is really high and the pay in that's pretty low.
But time and again, Democrats and Republicans came together to defend a stronger and safer Europe. It came together to pass once in a generation infrastructure law, building bridges connecting our nation and our people. We came together to pass the most significant law ever, helping victims exposed to toxic burn pits.
Bernie, I know your friend Joe right now is doing a nice poem on bipartisan legislation. He's very much loves working with Republicans. He spoke about the infrastructure deal. My understanding of the infrastructure deal, Bernie, is it's basically a privatization scheme, selling off a lot of America's public water, sewer, and public utilities to private companies. and not exactly providing long-lasting, permanent jobs. Is the infrastructure deal as great as the president makes it out to be?
No, it is definitely not. And unfortunately, what a lot of Americans tend to forget is that the infrastructure project, which is unfortunately a big corporate giveaway, was supposed to be done in conjunction with passing the Build Back Better deal. And that did not come to pass. Instead, we got this ridiculous corporate giveaway of an infrastructure bill. The president is wrong. He should not be bragging about this giveaway to corporate special interests. We are not building bridges. We are building whatever we're building to nowhere, and nowhere fast.
And Bernie, did you send a letter to your friend Joe telling him this, or you told him in person?
I told him in person, but unfortunately, he couldn't remember what I was saying. So I wrote a letter. He may have it in his desk, and we'll see if he actually gets around to reading it at some point. I have to tell you, Jordan, I am very, very frustrated so far.
It's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. It's about being able to look your kid in the eye and say, honey, it's going to be okay, and mean it. Well, folks, so let's look at the results. We're not finished yet by any stretch of the imagination, but unemployment rate is at 3.4%, a 50-year low.
What's the pay? What's the median income?
Say that again, Zeynab.
I said, what's the median income, Joe?
Say it ain't so, Joe. And by the way, like I said, millions of people have dropped out of the workforce because of letting it rip and the COVID pandemic. Not to mention, healthcare costs are higher than they have been in 30 years in this country. So,
and the Bureau of Labor and Statistics only counts people that are out of work for 6 months. So anyone out of work for any longer than 6 months aren't even counted in that 3% quote that he's having from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics.
If you live within the confines of the Washington, D.C. area, Southern Maryland, Northern Virginia, yeah, things are going really well. If you go into places like central Pennsylvania, Ohio, Kentucky, Michigan, all throughout the South, throughout the heartland, no, we are not doing very well. We have not seen an increase in the minimum wage. We have not done anything regarding health care. The environment is being destructed every single day. People do not have clean water to drink. A lot of problems, Jordan, a lot of problems. And hopefully the president will get around to talking about it.
800,000 new manufacturing jobs without this law, before the law kicks in. With this new law, we're going to create hundreds of thousands of new jobs across the country. And I mean all across the country, throughout not just the coast, but through the middle of the country as well. That's going to come from companies that have announced more than $300 billion in investment in American manufacturing over the next few years. Outside of Columbus, Ohio, Intel is building semiconductor factories on 1,000 acres, literally a field of dreams. It's going to create 10,000 jobs, that one investment, 7,000 construction jobs, 3,000 jobs in those factories once they're finished. They call them factories. Jobs paying an average of $130,000 a year, and many do not require a college degree.
Did he just say they call them factories?
They call them factors.
What's interesting about this, and file this under problems that Biden helped cause that he's now claiming he's fixing. I give you crime bill, et cetera. But this was something that wasn't talked about a lot during the worst of the COVID pandemic. Why didn't we have any masks in America? Why didn't we have any gowns in America? Why didn't we have eye goggles, et cetera, et cetera? Because people like Joe Biden as a senator pushed and profited off of NAFTA, pushed and tried to profit off of TPP. Senators like him let corporate America and Wall Street write multinational trade deals that sold the manufacturing base to China and Mexico.
Well, Sarah, for 30 years, I learned, she told me she'd been a proud member of the Iron Workers Local 44, known as the Cowboys in the Sky. Sarah said she can't wait to be 10 stories above the Ohio River building that new bridge. God bless her.
Bernie, are you starting to regret that you didn't go harder on this bum? I mean, for God's sakes, it is one platitude and hot air balloon after the next.
I just don't like seeing the president use hard-working people, especially people of color, as political props. It is a very bad look, and it is very inappropriate. We have the lowest percentage of union workers in this country that we've ever had. It's at 10%. That is way too low, and we must recognize that a labor movement must be robust and much bigger than anything President Biden and certainly President Trump have done in the past several years. And don't even get me started on President Obama.
With the Inflation Reduction Act that I signed into law, we're taking on powerful interests to bring healthcare costs down so you can sleep better at night with more security. You know, we pay more for prescription drugs than any nation in the world. Let me say it again. We pay more for prescription drugs than any major nation on earth. For example, 1 in 10 Americans has diabetes. Many of you in this chamber do, and in the audience. But every day, millions need insulin to control their diabetes so they can literally stay alive. Insulin's been around for over 100 years.
Didn't this guy say he would veto Medicare for all? Didn't he run on a public option?
Yeah. He's also acting like this is going to happen in the future. People's houses will be taken away in the future. People won't have insulin in the future. Hey, Biden, it's happening now.
And by the way, although it is good, Bernie, that insulin was capped at $35 for seniors, it's like the rest of everything. Why just for seniors? Do 64-year-olds not need affordable insulin?
Who do not or are not on Medicare, including 200,000 young people with type 1 diabetes who need this insulin to stay alive. Let's finish the job this time. Let's cap the cost of insulin for everybody at $35.
This time is in his next election cycle.
Right, but why? I think Brianna Joy Gray made this point. Why do they have selective concern for certain things? Why is it only insulin we should cap at $35? What about antidepressants? What about medication for Parkinson's? What about medication for epilepsy? I mean, we could go down the list. Not that insulin, we don't need cheaper insulin, but it's like they carve out specific things. Brianna Joy Gray made the point during COVID. Why free care for COVID, which, by the way, he didn't follow through on. He did run on, if you get COVID, your care in the hospital will be free. Totally abandoned that. But why not the same thing for cancer? Why not the same thing for all things like Europe and other civilized countries far less wealthy than us? So it's all cherry picked.
Biden just said he cut that doing this insulin for 65-year-olds, cut the deficit. Cut the federal deficit this month. That's his big accomplishment.
Oh, boy. We need Steve Grumbine to jump on.
Steve. I did not serve all of these years in the United States Congress and the U.S. Senate to have my good friend Joe turn into a modern Ronald Reagan.
Have you noticed Big Oil just reported his profits, record profits? Last year they made $200 billion in the midst of a global energy crisis. I think it's outrageous. Why? They invested too little of that profit to increase domestic production. And when I talk to a couple of them, they say, we're afraid you're going to shut down all the oil wells and all the oil refineries anyway, so why should we invest in them? I said, we're going to need oil for at least another decade. And that's going to exceed and beyond that. We're going to need it. Production.
Senator Sanders, he just said climate change is an existential threat, but just said we're going to need oil for the next decade. Which one is it?
We need a Green New Deal. That goes without saying. What we also need is to stop issuing more drilling permits for oil than President Trump. That was a big problem, and apparently he hasn't gotten the message. There are so many alternative energy solutions that are out there that do not involve hydraulic fracturing or fracking, do not involve drilling on native land to take advantage of those that do not have a voice. What we must do is move to a clean energy grid, and that includes all different alternative energy options that do not have a carbon footprint. And that includes exploration with nuclear, that includes solar, wind, geothermal, everything that does not involve destroying this planet any further. We cannot and must not tolerate this idea that we must rely solely on oil and gas for the next decade, because a decade from now, the next person in charge who is controlled by corporate interests will say it'll be another decade before we change.
Senator Sanders, I cannot stress this enough. The United Nations has said we don't have more, we have less than a decade until irreversible damage is done to this planet. And the president, your friend, just said we need oil for another 10 years. What planet is your friend Joe on when he says we need oil for another 10 years, where the UN says we have less than 10 years until irreversible damage?
As I said from the very beginning, my good friend Joe is not doing a very good job tonight. And now I am really, really unhappy with what he's been saying.
So Congress needs to fund these efforts and keep America safe. And as we emerge from this crisis stronger, we're also got to double down on prosecuting criminals who stole relief money meant to keep workers and small businesses afloat.
Are they going to start with the millionaires and billionaires?
He's talking about what I talked about, the PPP program, where Democratic and Republican Party donors raided the cookie jar. So he's talking about prosecuting them. I don't know who's in charge of that. The Attorney General? We're still waiting for the Attorney General to prosecute the criminals from 2008. That's not just Biden's fault. That's Obama's fault too. But the Democratic Party didn't prosecute the people who tanked the global fucking economy through widespread fraud. So what makes you think they're going to prosecute anyone who raided the cookie jar for PPP money that they shouldn't have got? Give me a break.
As many of you personally know, there's no words to describe the heartache or grief of losing a child. But imagine if you lost that child at the hands of the law. Imagine having to worry whether your son or daughter came home from walking down the street, or playing in the park, or just driving a car.
Imagine if you gave those same criminals $32 billion more to brutalize and kill people like Tyree Nichols. Just imagine.
We have to end qualified immunity. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, imagine getting that gutted out of the bill and threatening to veto if that was included. Just imagine that one too.
Don't reach for your license. Keep your hands on the steering wheel. Imagine having to worry like that every single time your kid got in a car. Here's what Tyree's mother shared with me when I spoke to her.
I don't want to hear him use Tyree Nichols' family as a prop. Unfortunately, there will be many more Tyree Nichols. We now, Breonna Taylor's, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't just the Democratic Party. It's the Republican Party. It's also all over the country on the local level. Our government, federal, state, and local, is basically bought off by police unions. There is a fetishizing in this country of the police. If the protests get out of hand, if there's fire or explosions, they'll cover it for longer because that's good TV. And then they'll move on until the next black person is killed. And by the way they covered this, and that this was the exception, they had all these police people and law enforcement on CNN and MSNBC saying this is the exception. This is bad police work. No. That video of them beating the hell out of Tyree Nichols, that happens a lot in this country. Most of the time, it's not caught on video.
Well, why they did that, Jordan? Because it was 5 black cops. They refused to arrest the white cops initially. So, yeah, they scapegoated. Well, not scapegoated because those black cops did it. What they did was use this to say black cops also beat people up. Well, hell, we know that shit. We know that. It's systemic racism. It's systemic brutality. It's institutionalized and privatized brutality.
Together to finish the job on police reform. Do something. Do something. That was the plea of parents who lost their children in Uvalde. I met with every one of them. Do something about gun violence. Thank God. Thank God we did.
And qualified immunity, Mr. President.
They're moving on to mass shootings, but let's be clear. The only thing that might make a dent in the brutality we're seeing if police officers, like every other profession, including doctors, have to carry personal liability insurance and can be sued civilly. It doesn't mean that's going to just totally zap the racism and power complex out of these police officers. It doesn't mean we won't see Black people profiled, brutalized, etc. But you might have people hesitate a little bit more if they know that they will be bankrupted if they, senselessly murder Black people.
And that was a terrible, terrible speech that was full of lies. One of the worst speeches
I got to be honest. I didn't think he was going to get through it at the beginning. It seemed like he was. I mean, it's funny. Everyone jokes about it, but it's like they hit him.
Bing, 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 bing. Sorry, go ahead.
Whatever they hit him up with, again, I don't want to pontificate and assume that they're shooting him up with some type of narcotic to get him to really get going, but it's almost like they know how to time it just right, that he needs to have like a certain amount of juice in him in order to get him through a speech.